Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get started?
Sure. I know you have, I think, I didn't know if you had other points of agenda, or
Hmm.
I don't want to crash your meeting. So
You're the star.
well, I'm I'll be the vehicle for some information. How about that? But um okay. So
Yeah, so this is our NAMI Urban Los Angeles Advocacy Council meeting, our regularly scheduled meeting, along with the council members here. And I also included our staff at NAMI Urban Los Angeles and our board members as well. So everyone will have the opportunity to hear where we are with care course, get the most recent information.
sure. And given that this was to that group of individuals, I didn't know if you wanted it to be more of just candid conversation, or if you wanted me to walk through some of those elements of the PowerPoint that I've shared with other groups. Um, so I didn't want to assume, and we
Yeah.
didn't talk specifics. You asked me to attend the meeting. I said I'd be happy to. So
Mhm.
I I wanted to ask what you
Yeah.
feel would be best.
Well, if you filled in the presentations that I saw at your office, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Make sure everybody's on the same page and we can get started from that point.
Okay, wonderful. Then I will happily do that, and I'll see if I can share my screen so that we can do that. I think it shows that I have that feature. So um, would that be all right in a second to do that?
Yes, let's see. Oh,
I know I can do it. It's lit up green. I think I have the capability to do it and the permissions.
yeah,
It
I
looks like
made
it.
you co-host, so you should be able to do it.
Oh, thank you. I'm like, wow, I have a bunch more buttons at the bottom. I usually don't have that many. So
See?
um it it does say that there are people waiting though. So
Okay.
do
I
you want
will.
me to, but I will say as we're letting as people are coming in, um, I'll say good evening to everybody who's here. My name's Jennifer Hunt, and I'm the acting senior deputy director for DMH over the reentry programs. And so reentry for DMH are the programs related to individuals that are coming out of different types of institutional care, whether that would be from the correctional system and criminal justice settings for adults and for youth, if that means individuals that are coming out of a more restrictive placement under LPS conservatorship, or for individuals that are being engaged in the field and in the community, such as individuals that are experiencing homelessness, are veterans, and individuals that are in the probation halls and camps that we serve as well. So those are the programs globally that are under the reentry umbrella here at DMH that I have administrative and clinical responsibility for. And under that branch as well are the court liaison and linkage programs. And that's where Care Court would be placed within our network of programs. So originally, when I accepted the assignment and offer from Dr. Wong when she took the helm last July, I did not anticipate Care Court becoming my eating, sleeping, living, breathing activity when it went live in January of this year and gave us a December start date. So I've been sharing and talking to as many people as will listen to me to share information. And that's kind of the backdrop to the information I'd like to share with you all this evening. And then kind of walk through the information and kind of where things are at, and then leave time and space to have a conversation. And for me, as someone who talks for a living, I could probably talk for a very long time about care court. So I want to be respectful of your time, your concerns, and your questions. So with Mr. Turner's permission, I will share some of this information in the PowerPoint and then use that as a way to have a conversation afterward, if that is okay with everyone on the call. So just wanted to share that as a kind of opener. I can see some individuals at the top kind of cascading through the screen, but some are not on camera, which is totally okay as well. So with that said, I will share my screen and we can start as people come in. And let me make sure that everyone can see. That one. Let's see. Haha, success. I think this is it. Let's try this. We'll find out. Is everybody seeing a PowerPoint that says care court?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. I have two screens, and this is what makes this slightly confusing for me and my computer at times with Zoom. So otherwise, all you would be seeing are yourselves. So I'm glad you can see the presentation. So just wanted to talk about care court, and I'll just say really quickly that as an overview, that this was a piece of legislation known as Senate Bill 1338, and it was passed in the fall of last year. And Los Angeles was named to be in what we considered the second cohort. We did not have an implementation date until the 2024 calendar year. And a series of events occurred in the fall and in the winter, starting with Mayor Bass's election as the new mayor of Los Angeles, her declaration for the state of emergency, the county's support of her declaration, and then the county's own declaration of a state of emergency of homelessness, which was in the first week or so of January 2023. It was then on the heels of that LA County decided to be an early implementer and start a year early into care court. And at the time, there were still legal concerns, and people were raising legal questions to the California Supreme Court. And at this point, it doesn't appear that those legal issues are still being raised. But that's just kind of the backdrop to how we set out and started looking to wrap our heads around care court, figure out how this was going to happen in Los Angeles. And all of the clinical subject matter experts at DMH who we gathered together to be able to start discussing this, we all came to the same conclusion, which was that we're here to help people. That's why we work for DMH. That's why we're here working in the county. And so while there are many different things that come our way through legislation and whatnot, that our end goal is still the same. We want to help people. And so that's where we decided, well, we could either be leaders or we could follow, and we would rather lead, and we would rather help influence and share some of the things that we know in Los Angeles work really well. And if we can help model that for other counties in the state, then let's do what we can. And so that was our mindset going into this. And so in this presentation, I want to share a little bit about what care court actually is, what it's going to look like here in LA, who this program is focusing on helping, and that comes in different forms. First, by the filing of a petition, then what a care agreement and or plan looks like, and then what care court is or how it differs from AOT, which some people may be familiar with as assisted outpatient treatment, and then talking about other DMH programs that are available here, right here and right now, that don't need to wait for care court's implementation in order to be accessible by our community members. Oh, okay. Let's see. So with care court, it actually stands for, I know we use the acronyms, and working for the county, we like our jargon and our acronyms, but it stands for Community Assistance, Recovery, and Empowerment Act. And it's a civil court process that is focusing and really trying to hold counties and government agencies responsible to serve individuals that have untreated schizophrenia spectrum or other psychotic disorders. It's focusing on behavioral health and housing resources and services. It's strongly protecting self-determination and civil liberties by adding and providing legal counsel and focusing on supported decision-making, psychiatric advance directives. And the goal is that we would be able to intervene sooner in the lives of individuals who need support, and that we want to make sure that our local governments have the support while being accountable for the way that we are working with the community. So those are kind of the overarching pieces of the care court legislation. So here's the big picture. How are we going to do this thing here in LA? So can everybody, hopefully everybody can still see the screen. So Nori, I believe you are one of the few people that's on my screen that's nodding yes. So I'm going to take your vote, thumbs up, and keep going. Everyone else isn't on screen. So there we go. So the way that care court operates according to the statute is that there are two large groups that can petition to have and file the care court paperwork. There are a lot of individuals under the other petitioner category, which I'll go to in a different slide, or there's the DMH as the petitioner. However the case may start, it goes into and has to have the legal determination if it meets the criteria. The criteria are laid out in the court form, and the court form asks questions about the individual and asks what role you as the petitioner would play in this process. How do you know the individual? I'm going to come back to this workflow, but I want to go to some of these other pieces. So, because I think that'll help inform us when we go back to the workflow and see how these all fit together. So the program is focused on helping adults. This is not a program for youth. And it's for individuals that have a diagnosis of schizophrenia spectrum or other psychotic disorders. Technically, you don't need to have the diagnosis, but the petition and part of this care legislation asks about the symptoms. So it does say in there that it asks if they have a diagnosis, but one of the things that comes up in my conversations is that there are individuals that maybe are having these difficulties or these experiences, but they don't have a formal diagnosis. And so that leads into the next point, which is that this is focused on helping individuals that are having behaviors or symptoms associated with this specific severe mental illness. The individuals for care court are individuals that are not clinically stabilized in an ongoing voluntary treatment setting. So if they're at a clinic or they have a team that they work with, but maybe you just don't think it's enough or that they need more, this is not the program that CARE is really focusing on trying to help. It's individuals that are not receiving treatment right now. And they would have one of the following criteria: that they would be unlikely to survive safely without supervision, and their condition is substantially deteriorating, or they need services and supports to prevent relapse or deterioration, which would lead to grave disability or harm to self or others, which, if you notice, is very similar to the language of the Welfare Institution Code around 5150. So the goal is to, if you were to have CARE and be involved in the CARE Court program, we would hope that that would be supportive and that you would not, the individual would not be in crisis, or that they wouldn't have to go into a hospital setting to get treatment and support. We emphasize that in the care plan or the agreement, that this would be the least restrictive alternative to get support and care, and that they would benefit from participating in this process. So those are from the statute about the participant. Here's the who can file a petition. So we kind of put it into 4 groups. One is individuals that the individual would know the family or from the home. So person that they live with, a spouse, parent, sibling, child, grandparent, or other individual that is in place of the parent, or, believe it or not, respondent. They can self-refer. Then you have community members. So first responders can file a petition. A director of a hospital where the respondent may be hospitalized. So if someone is currently in the hospital for a 5150 or a 5250, that director of the hospital can petition. You can also have a petition filed by the licensed behavioral health professional that's treating the respondent for mental illness. And you can have a director of a public or charitable organization that's providing health services, or a place where the respondent resides. So those are your groups for community members. And then you can also have members of the county file. So a county behavioral health director or the designee, such as DMH's care team or Dr. Wong's designated personnel. You can have the public guardian, or you could have the director of adult protective services. So 3 county departments could file a petition as well. And you could also have tribal jurisdiction, the director of California Indian Health Services programs, or a judge of a tribal court. While we have many different tribes and groups of individuals in the LA area, we don't have any tribal courts to our knowledge, but primarily we expect that we will see petitioners from these other 3 groups: the family home group, the community group, or the county group. And so I'm going to go back to this picture. So with the groups of petitioners in those 3 groups, or DMH being one of the 3, it would go to the courts to make the determination if the petition is completed and if it has one of 2 pieces of evidence. The first piece of evidence that the court document asks for is an affidavit by a mental health provider. Or it asks that there's evidence of 2 5250 hospitalizations. And the 5250 hospitalizations are the 14-day holds. So quite honestly, because of privacy laws, we kind of were scratching our heads about how family members or anyone outside of the hospital or law enforcement would have access to the documentation and knowledge that the two 5250s occurred. So we think that most likely petitions would have an affidavit from the mental health provider. But you need one of those two pieces of evidence, as the petition calls it, combined with a completed petition in order to submit to the court. In LA, as it's a cost set by the Judicial Council across the state, to file a civil petition like this, it would be $435. From the beginning, LA County was waive the fee and was not going to charge anybody for filing this type of petition with the court because they're trying to get help for somebody. And it appears that now that is going to be legislated and official statewide in the coming months, with a piece of legislation that is going to add that officially to the statute. In LA, we were fortunate that was never going to be part of our, that wasn't going to be a barrier for individuals to file the petition. At the initial hearing, this is when the determination is made if the person meets the criteria to be a participant in care court. And so this is the arrows at the top that continue to move forward. If DMH was not the one that filed the petition, then that's how, from the prima facie determination, that's how it takes a little bit of an offshoot downturn, and DMH would be ordered to investigate and to bring back the information. And this is one of the safeguards, because there were concerns in the statute that you may have somebody what they considered to be a vexatious litigant, where you may have someone inappropriately filing repeated complaints or petitions. And this was one of the ways that the legislation wanted to ensure that only individuals that were being appropriately referred were to get to this point. So if, as we go to the initial hearing, if this is considered, the application is complete, at that point, even if the petitioner was one of those other members of that list, DMH becomes the identified party to move this forward from that point onward. So then they look at the hearing and the merits, and they say, okay, is this something that the individual would have the opportunity to be there at that initial hearing? And at that point, that's when counsel would be appointed to the respondent. And the statute was very specific because it wanted a qualified legal entity to be that responsible party. It did not, the statute did not want the public defender to be that default person. And the state took a little bit of time to put together the requests for bids, and the RFP process is what it's called. And that period of offers and bids to become those qualified legal entities literally just closed yesterday. So right now, across the whole state, there is no idea who the qualified legal entities are in any county that would be representing a respondent, which is kind of wild to think, because some of the other counties are starting October 1st. So the lawyers don't have any idea how this is going to potentially be sorted out, but they're working frantically, I think, to get those things put in place. As we walk through the different pieces, and I don't know if you can see that I kind of using the pointer. As we have the hearing on the merits, and the respondent has the opportunity to have their lawyer have time to meet and discuss and figure out if they want to participate. And while many people may believe that the individual needs this program and needs help, the individual, the respondent, may not agree with that. And so this is a large point of discussion, especially with loved ones that are thinking of referring a family member, because they're like, well, my loved one doesn't want the help. They don't think they need the help. And this is the reason that we're frustrated and trying to get them help, is because we know they need the help. But what we've shared with everyone, as I've talked about this and my colleagues have talked about this process, is that at the end of the day, this is a voluntary process. And so if someone doesn't want to participate, they can choose not to participate. Now, will we continue to outreach? Will we continue to try to have conversations? Will we try to see what we can do to help them out? Absolutely. But there is always a choice, an element of choice in these things. So as we move through the different types of court appearances and the determination about whether or not they would be likely to enter into an agreement and come up with a plan, and that plan would be something in the realm of working with DMH, working with our team members, and looking at what are some of the things that they could use some support and resources for. As a court process, following this agreement or discussions about agreement, then we would have evaluation review hearings and talk about this agreement. If they're not in agreement and they still don't want to do it, then it would convert over to what we call a care plan. But the process and ultimately the recommendations of the team may actually be the same. It just may be whether or not the respondent is open to it and agreeing to it at first, or if that's something that maybe after working with the team and talking more and talking with our different members, that maybe they would be open to participating with a greater level of willingness in that. And then we would, at maximum, every 2 months, go back and share with the court what's happening. At the 1 year mark, then we would talk about next steps. Is this something that they are successfully completing, and are they having success on their road to recovery? Or is this something that they still would benefit from an additional year of participation in care? And so that's where you'll see that there's a loop at the 11th month mark, that if they elect to stay in the program for an additional time period, or if it is believed by the team and the judge that it would be beneficial if we continued to offer care services, whether or not, the individual agrees, we would just continue to try and work with them and get them involved in a voluntary treatment program. And then at last, if they are, then we would go back up to the graduation hearing at the 2nd year at that point. But either way, through the statute, the care court process is only set up for a year with a potential 1 year extension. It is not an ongoing program based on clinical need like some of our other programs at DMH. I'm going to go we had talked about this because this is the respondent group. This is the petition group.
If you notice, we have some hands.
Sure.
I don't want to go before Gina and Cynthia.
No. So thank you, because I can't see much when I'm presenting. So I wholeheartedly appreciate you saying that. If Mr. Turner, who is or Nuri, you are front and present on my screen. Who is with, who has
Cynthia,
hands up?
Cynthia had her hand up. first.
Okay.
Jean was up before me. Jean was up first and then I could go second. Is Jean still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Jean.
Hi. Thank you so much, Dr. Hunt, for this information. It's so important.
Oh,
So
of course.
you mentioned the required affidavit by the mental health
Yes.
provider.
Yes,
What level of mental health provider is acceptable?
good question. So
Do they need to be licensed?
no, they do not. They can be wavered, which is
Okay.
which is interesting because when we come back to other parts of the process, it appears that licensure is required, but we're trying to get clarification on that. And but that is spelled out in the form, that Care 100 form. It does talk about, and it gives a caveat for the licensure or the waivered status. So
Okay.
great question.
Second part of that is the two 5250 holds.
Yes.
In what period of time? Are those like within the last year, or if they had one 10 years ago and now they had another one 2 years ago, is that good enough?
One of them had to be within so many months. So it's not that both of them had to occur within the specific period of time. Only one of them had to be within a recent amount of time. And I will pull up the actual statute and clarify the actual amount of days, because I don't want to misquote from memory, because that's not helpful.
I think it says on this slide 60 days.
There you
Yeah,
go. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yes. I knew it was days, it wasn't, but yes, only one of them has to be within the previous 60, because the point is that there has to be some element of what has changed recently for this person. And it goes back to the deterioration component, is the concern about that the individual's state is decompensating without this type of intervention.
Okay, but the 5250 is just one example of an intensive treatment, not the
But-
only one.
They are specific about the 5250. But it's an or. If you have the declaration, then you don't need the evidence of the 5250s.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. No problem. And there was a second hand?
Cynthia,
Hello, Cynthia.
how are you? You know, every
Okay.
time I come to one of your events, I'm learning more and more and more. I heard.
You better be quality assurance for me if you've heard this more than once.
There's so much. Okay.
I know
I'm
there
a little
is. So,
confused because you had
Sure.
mentioned before that the $435 filing fee was going to be waived.
it is.
It is? Okay, so
Mhm.
that is clear. I really, because before, when you mentioned it here, I didn't feel like it was waived.
It is waived. It was always going to be waived for LA, but we weren't going to brag about that to other counties because it was a huge bone of contention with the other counties. And then we found out that legislation was going to go through and make it waived for everyone, which made us feel that that was really the best move for
Really,
the
I think it's wonderful.
access. Exactly. Reduce the barriers to concerns. And on that, because I got to the screen finally, I did a little bit of a different order, but I was going to talk about Norwalk. Were you going to ask me about Norwalk?
No, I wasn't going to ask about Newark. I wanted to ask about
Sure.
When is Los Angeles starting care court? Because I heard January and now I'm hearing December. So are we going into this earlier?
So we were notified in January of this year
Right.
that we were going to be implementing in 2023 instead of 2024. So our go live date for Los Angeles is December 1st.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
Everybody else is starting October 1st.
Is that like Orange County, Irvine? Who else is starting?
So there's 7 counties. It would be Orange County,
Uh-huh.
Riverside County, San Diego,
Mhm,
So those are our neighbors. Then we have Northern, which is San Francisco,
mhm.
Glenn County, Stanislaus County, Tuolumne. I have to count them off. Tuolumne, Glenn, San Fran,
7, and Los Angeles being the 8th.
correct.
Got it.
So those are the 7 original, and then us in LA as the early implementer from the second cohort. They were calling us cohort 1.2, but my colleagues and the higher ups didn't like that. They're like, we are early implementers. We are not 1.2. So,
Thank you very much.
oh, you're welcome. So the petition itself, ideally, the courts are going to have an online filing, and they're working on that. The petition can also be filed in person at the Norwalk Courthouse, which is where the hearings will occur. You can also file in person at the Hollywood Courthouse, and you can also file anywhere the self-help centers are located. And so we are helping the court with information that will be available online, and we're also helping them in figuring out how to support the self-help centers. So if individuals that would file the petition come to the self-help, that they would have all the resources at their disposal, as well as if respondents come to the self-help centers because they received this information and they're now being asked to appear in court, that they can get information and resources as well. With the Norwalk Courthouse, there's actually going to be 2 courtrooms that are going to be assigned specifically to care court. We don't have too many details on that yet, but originally we thought that there may be a mixture of different types of cases in the courthouse, in that courtroom. But according to the court administration on Friday of last week, they have confirmed that only care court matters will be held in those 2 courtrooms at Norwalk. And we are working on and have proposed that we would like to have our DMH, we would like to have DMH members at the courthouse available for any and all questions or concerns that may come up, not only for care court, but honestly for any type of mental health resource or support.
That's wonderful.
We do have court liaisons and other DMH team members at various courthouses. And one of the interesting things that the self-help centers are working on are the idea of these self-contained workspaces that could be connected to the self-help network, so that if an individual were to go into a courthouse and want to speak with someone in a private space, that they would be able to do that through these workstations. And they're still trying to figure out the vendor who's going to be the one responsible for these. And they look as though they are a completely like self-contained cubicle concept. But since they are enclosed because for privacy, there may be some logistics in some of the courthouses where they're not as modern. Let's put it that way nicely. So the court has some work to do related to how they're going to make that operational. But their plan is that they would be connected via video system so that individuals could have resources related to self-help, potentially participate in hearings remotely if that is to their geographic preference. There's a lot of different things that the court is trying to make it as accessible as possible. There's also the potential that individuals can participate in this process and not have to go to the Norwalk Courthouse at all. But we're kind of wanting to make sure that that is in the the respondent's best interest and that they are that is from their preference, and we're trying to figure out how we can support that. So with the petition, these are the elements of the care agreement. So we want to focus on what type of behavioral health or mental health services can be provided. Then we want a member of the team to be able to discuss any sort of recommendations or considerations related to medications. And again, this is all voluntary. So there are no mandated medications. There are no involuntary medication components. We also have a large amount of housing resources that are a focus of the Care Court program. And we also want to be able to make sure that we have social services and supports available. In the housing and in the social services and supports, while schizophrenia and other psychotic spectrum disorders are the focus, if an individual has a co-occurring substance use and mental health difficulty, co-occurring would meet criteria for Care Court. However, if someone only has a substance use issue, they would not be eligible. And that's where our partners at Public Health and SAPC, the substance abuse treatment programs, would come into play, because we want to make sure that if individuals or loved ones are seeking substance abuse treatment and support, that they have those resources available to them. And again, because it's voluntary, the respondent or the individual still has to consent and want to have those services in order to activate them.
Is there a
This is-
provision
yes.
for drug-induced psychosis?
Good question. And we've been told that the court is not going to have that level of scrutiny to the potential diagnostic differentials. The only thing that has been stated overtly is that mood disorders with psychotic features would not be part of this. So whether it's depression, bipolar, anything in the mood realm that may have the component of something with psychotic features, that would not be eligible. I think for us is that we want to be able to help individuals. And so if the nexus is a mental health concern, then that's what we are going to address and treat. I don't think we're going to look that, and honestly, we may not be able to get to that level, right, of diagnostic differentials too. You know, a lot of people start having symptoms and use substances to try to treat it. So we'd rather just try to figure out how to help people and focus on that. But it's a good
Sam has
question.
had his hand up for a long time. Sam?
I'm sorry, I don't see any other hands. So yeah, please, whoever,
Okay.
shout
That's
out.
okay. That's okay. I had a couple of questions.
Please.
I'm from a different NAMI chapter, but I was invited to this to sort of witness and sort of get a sense of where everyone is on it.
Sure.
So we talk a lot about volunteering and how this is an opt-in program.
Yes.
But it does seem, and you can maybe scroll back to the timeline chart. I think that might be helpful for people as I ask this.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of time up top before any lawyers are involved. And I guess my question is, where are people existing, right? Because it looks like if you look at the timeline on the bottom, there's about potentially up to a month where somebody could be brought in without any counsel on their side.
No. Counsel's assigned immediately here, initial hearing.
Sure, but isn't there a month before that?
No.
If you look at the timeline, what's the 14 court days or 28 court days from the prima facie determination to the initial hearing?
The prima facie is a process by the court. That's not an in-person, that's the determination that paperwork wise that the paperwork was complete.
So
So-
he's looking at the timeline at the bottom of your
Right.
page.
So this is the process from the time that the determination's made by the court. That's when that 14 days starts. So there's no point in time that the respondent would ever be asked to be part of the process. They have to be notified, and then that's all, at that time, that's when counsel is assigned. So there's no time where they would not be represented.
And so just to like truly make it as basic as possible, somebody files a report on person X,
Sure.
right? Walk me through the next steps of how it impacts their life and when they are asked to be places.
Sure. So the triangles
Mhm.
are where it's a paperwork component.
Mhm.
Paperwork is completed. It is handed or submitted to the court. This prima facie determination box is when the court determines that the paperwork is complete. If the paperwork is not complete, which means the CARE 100 form plus the affidavit or
Yes.
the evidence, that is what moves it forward. And if this was not DMH, that's how it goes down to this lower box. If it is DMH that petitioned, that's how it goes to the upper box.
Got it. And so
Yes.
when do I, the person X who is the
Mhm.
subject of this
Person X.
report, get notified?
That is when the notification and those components occur here, because if they're not notified, they don't even know because they may not be the petitioner, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
So if I get that, if someone wrote a petition about me 14 days ago, right?
mhm,
Presumably no earlier than 28 days ago, based on that,
mhm, mhm.
do I have to show up to court?
In all honesty, no. And that's where the voluntary component comes in. And so,
Am I notified who
Yes.
filed the petition?
yes, you would be notified. You'd be notified that it exists. You'd be notified of it. And it would be via mail, which is kind of counterintuitive, especially if someone is experiencing homelessness, because how are you supposed to
Yeah.
mail them a notice somewhere?
Mm-hmm. Do I know who filed it against me?
I believe so, but I would have to get clarification on that one. I believe
Okay.
you do, because then once you get to the actual hearing, that's when those items are presented. And at that point, the minute that you are there, that's when the counsel would be appointed.
Got it. So in theory, there is a potential and honestly a pretty likely scenario where somebody who experiences a mental health related incident is either hospitalized or put outside of their own control, right? There's a 60-day window that they could have had a 5250 in, right? They come back from that, get a letter from a potential loved one in their mailbox that they might not have access to, right? Notifying them. We don't know how to control for all these potential notifications that don't exist. And we don't necessarily know who will be defending them yet. Once they get to the initial hearing, we don't know what qualifications they have. I haven't heard one conversation about the expertise the adjudicators would have. It doesn't sound like they quite have an understanding of the mental health issues that are going on there, right? And this is all supposed to launch within the next 2 months.
For us, 6 months. For the rest
Sure.
of the 7 counties, October 1st.
So
Yes,
given
there's a lot of variables. Absolutely.
totally, and I understand that, and I've worked on similar systems when it comes to immigration, and I think this is really ambitious. I guess what I'm just trying to understand is if we're supposed to buy in on this on an organizational level, wouldn't it make more sense for the county and the government to have their ducks in a row and present a complete proposal before organizations like NAMI supported it?
Sure. Absolutely. I think absolutely. I would hope that too. But that's not how it has played out, to be honest.
Are
You know what I
you
mean?
are you in support of the program as it exists currently?
I'm in support of getting people help however I can.
Do
You
you
know what I
think
mean?
it's an effective way to do it?
I wasn't part of it. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like,
No, I know.
this
I'm
is
just trying to understand. Yeah. This
sure.
is helpful and
It's
clarifying.
but just like any other process, right? Whether it's imposed by statute or whether it's imposed by the organization I work for, this is the process that's laid out. And this is all pulled directly out of the statute.
Totally.
So me as the psychologist clinician, okay, I want to help people, we are like, okay, let's figure out how we can help people given that this is the process that is laid out by law.
Got it. And is there any
And I'm candid about it. Like you're asking me, well, wouldn't it be better to set it up another way? Well, yeah, you kind of hope you'd have that all set up before you decide to roll it out across the state.
Mhm.
But that wasn't my call. And
Got
so it's like, here we are. And I think being transparent and candid about it, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to, kick it down the road or any of that. No, I'll stand behind. Yeah, it would
Totally.
have been way better. But
I
no
appreciate you
doubt.
saying that because it's super
Yeah.
interesting coming in late on this to sort of understand, what is already in place and what isn't. And so this
Sure.
is super, super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, this is the whole idea. And that's why I think that this graphic is important because it allows us to have that conversation when we have been in discussion at all levels of the county about it. We've been working with public defender and alternative public defender on how are we going to make this happen here in LA. And that was their first comment at that initial hearing part was, okay, so what happens if my client doesn't want to participate and they don't come to the initial hearing?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody said, well, it's voluntary. And what is, if any, a consequence if they don't show up? So to use your example for client person X, if they do not show up to that initial hearing, what's going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let's play it out. And the fact is, the judge is probably going to tell DMH, go out and try to talk with this person and share with them about the services and the resources. But at the end of the day, there's no ordering them to court. There's no bench warrant. There's no sanction. There's no, okay, well, you're going to go and pick that person up and bring them to court. There's none of that. There's no consequence in that sense if the person exercises their right and says, no, I do not want to participate in this voluntary program.
I think we have Romana's hand up. Romana?
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank
hello,
you.
good evening.
Hi.
Yeah, I have, I guess, questions and comments. I mean,
Sure.
just for the people that are homeless, there's no
Mhm.
way they're gonna get the letter. And instead of wasting this money, and instead of initiating a court process, can we initiate it during the hospitalization and have this conversation with the individual to make sure they want it? Because I'm talking
Yeah.
from personal experience. I would love the help for my son, but whether my son's gonna accept it or not, it's a
Yeah.
different story. And most of the people
I
that
know.
are gravely ill are not because they don't think they are.
I
So
know.
can we find a better way instead of initiating a letter that they might never receive, especially if they're homeless, and
Mhm.
have that conversation maybe during the hospitalization? If it's a provider that's starting it, that's doing it, or it's a health worker, a community worker that's out in the street, start
Right.
having that conversation and doing reach out to the people that will most likely say yes. Because I mean, I would love to be able to help everybody. I know in my son's case, I would love it. But the reality is, will he accept it? He might not.
Yep.
And I think it'll be a
And-
waste of money when we can be
and-
helpful to others.
And I wholeheartedly appreciate you sharing that. And that's why when I've talked with members of the community and shared with them about this process, then I also share about the other programs that we have right now, such as our home team, who does do that homeless outreach, mobile engagement, where we can try to get them and work with individuals to agree to services without ever going to care court in the first place. And so that's the pieces on the side where we would be the petitioner, is for us to look at those cases before we send them and refer them to care court. Okay, what other county program might this person be more appropriate for? And we have our homeless outreach teams now that are seeing many people now. Why wait to try to get help in care court when we can try to help people right now?
Is there a way, especially if it's initiated by a family member or hospitalization? Because, I mean, we're talking about gravely ill, and that's a definition for both of conservatorship and for care court. Is there any way that we can do both together so that the person that is the assigned conservator can then agree to the services that the person who's gravely ill might not? And that way we can get them into a place that maybe with medication, they'll start making their own decisions. Because unfortunately, with mental health, getting conservatorship, that's a whole other ordeal and process to go through. And it's limited to a certain time frame.
Well, and that's the thing, is that one does not, you can have both concurrent. So in your example, if the individual's in the hospital and the hospital recommends for care, they can also recommend for conservatorship. They don't have to go to care first. If the doctor believes that they are going to request the conservatorship and continue down the welfare institution codes from the 3-day, 14-day, 30-day, and onward, they can do that. So this care court doesn't stop the hospital's decision-making process to pursue conservatorship.
No, I was just thinking, as say a family member, and then we initiate both at the same time. And then the person, the conservator, would then agree to care court and not actually the person that's diagnosed.
But if the person has a conservator, they would not be in care court because they would already have someone making those legal decisions for them.
No, for care court to help us become the conservator at the same time, because more
I-
than likely
okay.
they're not going to volunteer. If they're gravely ill, they're not going to volunteer for help. You know, it's very rare. And if we can, if the family members can go into care court and say, look, I'll take full responsibility, I'll be a conservator, I agree to care court services in place. Maybe we can get more people help to a place at least where they're medicated and thinking clearly, and not when they're gravely disabled.
Right. I get that, but at the end of the day, the care court process, that the respondent, like you said, the client, the individual, they would have to agree to the services, but somebody that's that petitioner or the individual that's the supporter, that the supporter role is there to support the individual in their decision making, to help them with maybe understanding and starting to gain some insight and awareness about what's going on. But this process, if the person doesn't complete care court within 6 months of the time that they are no longer a participant, that's when that information can be used for an LPS conservatorship investigation. Which I think kind of goes to what you're describing, that if the person isn't participating in this, then by kind of what we would say falling out of the care court process, them not completing it or participating kind of shows that they're having a more difficult time, and that maybe then LPS conservatorship investigation should be explored.
It just blows my mind because, giving, and I'm just talking from my own personal experience,
Mhm.
giving somebody who's gravely disabled and can't
Mhm.
even take care of themselves, the
Yeah,
decision to
Yeah.
accept services they do not understand just doesn't
Yeah.
make sense.
yeah. Well, and that's the piece that I think people bring up the most when I talk about this workflow process, is that we're assuming that somebody who doesn't have a level of awareness is going to want to participate in a voluntary program. Oftentimes I get people telling me, well, if they wanted to participate, Jennifer, they would have been. That's the point, right? And so that is the difficult place and space of something that is still voluntary at the end of the day. And
I
yes,
just want to do a little time check to make sure
yes,
we can, get to the end, and
yes.
maybe we'll hold the questions till we get to the end and leave about 10 minutes or so for questions.
That sounds fair.
Okay.
Thank you for keeping us all on track. So a big component of this care plan is also housing. And so I wanted to share briefly that this was part of the proposal for LA County to use the money that the state had allocated to LA County based on our population, that the county would be able to use a $321 million pot. 60 million, or approximately 20%, would go to substance abuse treatment programs through DPH, and the remainder would be with DMH. This would help us increase shelter and interim housing. This would help us with rental assistance. This would help us with housing navigation, which would be participant assistance funds to help individuals move into a place. Landlord outreach and mitigation. So when maybe there's some property damage, that we could pay for the repairs. And then we also have a flexible funds category for helping build up the infrastructure and help us with other types of resources. So finally, I just want to kind of highlight and note that, as some members of the call have talked about, that there are some different pieces of care that in this process differ from other programs that we have or other types of court-related processes. One that we get asked a lot about are the differences between care and assisted outpatient treatment, or AOT. So care has a very specific list of the mental illness diagnoses that qualify. AOT does not. AOT does not have a limit to, or a specific group of diagnostics. But in reverse, care has a large group of individuals that can file a petition, whereas AOT, it's much more narrow. The care has a supporter that is offered, that is someone that can assist the treatment team and help the respondent with supportive decision making and psychiatric advance directives, and being involved and responsible, and a strong self-advocate for their own care. The Care Court program is for 1 year. AOT, it's for 6 months, and then it has to be renewed. And then lastly, Care Court is available in every county statewide by mandate by 2025. Some counties, they elected not to participate in AOT. The other hallmark of Care Court is that anybody can participate in care court as a respondent and their insurance does not matter. So if they have private insurance, if they have managed care, that they still can participate in care court, which is a big difference because for AOT and for many of our other programs at DMH, we're focusing on helping individuals that don't have the private insurance resources and that either have Medi-Cal or don't have a funding source. So this is a very, very different piece that makes care court different and unique. So this kind of talking about the continuum and talking about where care court fits in relation to the other services that we already have here at DMH, this is where care court sits. It's less restrictive than AOT and the services as you go to the right-hand side and go toward the red. And it's more restrictive because it is involved in a court process than FSP or our outpatient treatments, whether it's in the field or going to a clinic and seeing someone at a clinic. And then the last one is our other information and resources. So, and this is the last page, and I will happily drop and send it via email, but I can also drop the presentation in the chat so that people can download it themselves and have it, is that if you have someone that you're concerned about, you don't have to wait for care court in order for us to try to help them now. And so that's what I want to end on as we go into any sort of questions or conversation, is that we don't want you or anyone else to think that you have to wait for care court to get help for your loved ones and or potentially yourself, that we have things available and resources today that we want to make available and just use this as an opportunity to remind people that you don't have to wait for care court in December. It's July. We don't want anybody to wait if they need help now. And I think on that note, it feels very weird talking to a screen where I can't see individuals. So I am going to stop sharing and let's see if this will let me return to the screen. Let's see. To go to gallery view. I don't know where I am in the process, but did my video come back on? Can you see me?
I can see you.
Okay.
Yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I can see now. Here I am. Oh, there we are. All right. So now I can see a few faces that have come on camera. So this makes me feel much better. Now I can see and we can talk. But this I hope this gives some context and some kind of basic information about how we envision care court and participating in this process. Just on a basic. I don't know, in all honesty, I had an open-ended time. I had 6 p.m., but I did not have an end time, to be honest. So,
Okay.
but just because I didn't put one doesn't mean that everybody else doesn't have one. So, but I know that because we kind of took questions and had dialogue during that that may not have had an opportunity for everybody that does have questions to be able to raise them. So I'm happy and open. I know, Jean, you have your hand up. I don't know if that was new hand raised or
It is.
oh, okay. So
So capacity wise, I
Yes.
realize that everybody is still scrambling to try to figure this whole process out. And
Mhm.
I appreciate your telling us where you are in the process for LA County, but
Sure.
how many individuals do we expect to have in a year go through the care court process? And you know, we're experiencing a shortage of mental health providers and other professionals in the field. Do we
Mhm.
have capacity to handle this?
Okay. First is the state thinks that in LA County, we will only get approximately 4,500 petitions in a year. We respectfully disagree, and we think it'll be higher. And the reason why is because we know that in the county, right, 10 million people, that approximately 1% of the population would most likely meet criteria for schizophrenia. That's almost 100,000 people right there out of 10 million. And then when you layer on the difficulties in the other areas described by CARE relating to housing and resources and other medical presentations and all the other things that may be impacting an individual that's been experiencing homelessness for quite some time. We had a study by the California Policy Lab within the last year or two that identified that approximately 50,000 individuals in our county are experiencing homelessness, and that of that group, approximately 10% would meet criteria for a severe mental illness, such as schizophrenia. So that right there, 10% of 50,000 of our identified individuals experiencing homelessness would put us at 5,000. So we think the state's number is low.
But I mean, for the curious thing would be how many of those 5,000 applicants actually accept services?
Right.
And hopefully we'll be able to in a year then adjust services. Because
Right.
you of course you're going to get the applications of all concerned parents and medical
Sure.
providers, but are they going to accept it is a different story.
True. And we also have to attempt to locate them. And if there's a lot of individuals that don't have somewhere where we can consistently locate them, we're going to spend a lot of time looking for people too. And so we are talking about that, relating back to Jean's question about staffing. We are estimating, based on that 4,500 applications, that we are planning to put at least 8 individuals in each service area to start. And then based upon the numbers of referrals and where they come in geographically, that is how we are going to shift our staffing to address any other referrals that are coming in. And if we need to adjust some of the initial 8 per service area, then we will do that. If we're finding that certain communities have greater numbers and other communities have less numbers of petitions, that is how we're going to adjust accordingly. But the initial request was for 110 members to join the care court team. And the board has approved that. And as of 1:30 this afternoon, the CEO's office green-lighted the staffing plan and said, okay, start hiring. We'll give you the green light. So that's where it sits. And that news is literally very fresh, since we just met with the CEO at 1:30 this afternoon. And Rowena, you have your hand up.
Quick question. Now,
Sure.
will this also be applicable to patients coming out of the state hospitals?
They would be eligible.
Okay.
There's no limit to, as long as they meet the care criteria,
Mhm.
a petition can be filed. We
So
do.
is that before as they're exiting, can we start on it before they're released?
Usually when the state hospitals are discharging, they oftentimes are reaching out to the county
Mhm.
and trying to coordinate care. And so that's one way. But yes, if there are known, there is no, to my knowledge, there's been no discussion about where the person may be at the time that it's filed. And the other discussion was, what if the person is in the LA County Jail? Can that petition be filed while they're in the jail? So we're also working on that part of it too.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Any additional questions? I was just thinking, Jennifer, and I don't know if you have
Yes.
insight into that too. I know, they were looking at the abilities of the court system as well to
Mhm.
absorb this new workload.
Mhm.
And they're pretty short staffed going in now, and I don't know if I don't have the latest information on how they plan to address that issue. But yeah.
The courts, I think, in identifying 2 courtrooms to handle all the care matters. One of the judges that originally went to Norwalk, he asked to be the judge for
Mhm.
care. And right now he is, his courtroom, because care is not active yet, he is overseeing some of the LPS cases as well as the AOT cases.
Mhm.
And he's been very verbal about the fact that he wants care court. And so that was something that he, with intention, wanted to be part of. And he has had very positive, I think, experiences with clients and really connecting, reading it for the AOT cases, because AOT is under me. He's really connected with clients and really wants to see how he can get them linked with services and be well and not need to come to his courtroom. So I'm hoping that we continue forward with that. And also just trying to figure out how to support the court in general. They're trying to figure out space for us so that we can have a presence at the Norwalk courthouse, to call ours, so that we can be a part of that fabric. So I think those are both positive things, even with as many shortages and difficulties that they're dealing with at this time too.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, I want to thank you, Jennifer, for updating us and bringing this valuable information to us. And there'll be more information coming, I'm sure. But,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So luckily, maybe we can have you back again.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Anytime, I would be happy to. The the staffing piece is going to be the next step,
Yeah.
in that now that the CEO has said, yes, we agree with your plan, you're using the money that the state has allocated, we understand how you're going to do these things. One of the pieces that changed from the time that, for example, I first met Jean at St. Anne's, as well as I believe one of the other members who is no longer on the call, or I can't see them, was that we were originally going to be asking for MHSA innovations funding for our peer items, because we wanted to have almost a 50% ratio of our teams. We wanted a 1-to-1 we wanted a clinician paired with a person with lived experience. And that was what we saw as our team members. And so originally we were going to ask for an MHSA innovations proposal. And we were going down that path. And then one of our interim housing plans that Latina Jackson and Dr. Funk proposed, which is really innovative and is another housing emphasis with resources and supports. They are moving forward with the implementation dollars and we are going to move that forward and try to expand the different types of supportive housing. So we shifted, and while we didn't pursue the innovations dollars, we kept the staffing and the request the same. So we are not changing what we felt was the best way to move forward, which is to have a very large presence of persons with lived experience as different members of our team, whether it's substance abuse counselors, clinic drivers, community health workers, senior community health workers, that didn't change. So the behind the scenes, how we were going to fund it or get it reimbursed changed, but our decisions and with our team members that have been talking about it since the beginning, that has never changed, and that hasn't changed. And that one-to-one was approved by the CEO. So I'm very happy. And, just like I care about getting people services, if it means that we're going to use this care court process, or if it means we're going to use another process, that's fine by me, because I just want to get people help. And we feel that this is the best way to do it, is to have our partnership and have our teams together so that you have, and our clients have the best of all worlds, right? They have somebody that has training in one area, persons that have experience in another area, and combined, I think that, and all of us have come together and we all agree that this would be the best way to bring services to the community. So that's another piece that I want to share, because for those that heard me talk about this earlier in the year, we were still going through the innovations process. And I don't want people thinking, well, what happened? Did that go by the wayside? No. As a matter of fact, that vision, that plan, and that collaboration is still the same moving forward.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure. And is it okay to send the PDF to you for distribution? Would that be the easiest?
Either way, or you can drop it in the chat, either way.
Okay. I know sometimes not everybody can access the chat. I'm happy to do both.
Okay.
But then that way, I don't want anybody to miss out because they're not able to download it from Zoom.
Okay, well, you can send it to me and I'll make sure it goes out to the same mailing list that I use.
That would make me feel better.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you so much for all your hard work, Dr. Hunt. Really appreciate everything that you're trying to do. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jean. I appreciate it. And it's good to see people I have met for the first time during this process, and that I hope I continue to see in different events and in different ways and spaces. So I appreciate it. And for those that I'm meeting for the first time, I'm very happy to share. And Sam, if you want to fire off any other questions on workflow, I'm happy to, and you'll have my contact info as well.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate that you're engaged and trying to make sure that you understand and be the best advocate for anybody that would be asking questions about this. So thank you.
Is it possible for you to drop your email in the chat real quick?
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I'm looking and I'm trying to drop the PowerPoint and it's telling me, it opened it up in another field in my web browser. I'm like, no, I don't need to see my PowerPoint. I need to drop it. So I may have to default to your offer about sending it, but I
Okay.
will, let me do this before I go to do that.
Okay, while she's doing that, I would just want to say, you know, this is our regularly scheduled meeting time for the NAMI Urban Los Angeles Advocacy Council. And Care Court was high on our list of items to address as part of advocacy efforts we're doing out of NAMI Urban Los Angeles. The other, but we are looking at SB 43 as well, which is redefining gravely disabled and what that might mean for getting people more help. And I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I saw something scoop in. I guess the silence is starting to lift over the governor's office about what it's reimagining behavioral health in California is going to be from his perspective. So those are the big issues that we'll be working on as part of the Advocacy Council. So anybody who wants to be a part of that process, just shoot me an email and I will put you on the mailing list. And we meet at 6 o'clock on the third Tuesday of every month. Good. Thank you, everyone. And thank you again, Jennifer. Appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. And I will have to email it to you because I've attempted twice to drop it into the chat and it is not cooperating.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
my apologies on that, but I did put my email in. So
Great.
thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You take care,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.